Say yes to new beginnings.
Yes.
Say yes to new standards of excellence.
Yes.
Say yes to engaging reportage with a difference.
Yes.
Introducing Yes International Magazine. The time to say yes to your dreams and aspirations is here.
Yes, our guest tonight is Mr. Richard Akinnola. Mr. Richard Akinnola, for those who may not know, is a legal affairs journalist. He's also a media law expert, a legal historian, an author of over 15 books on media, human rights, and political history, including The Legal Limits of Journalism and Law of Defamation Made Simple, a public affairs analyst and a leader in the civil society. He was one of the founders of the first human rights group in Nigeria, and that's talking about Civil Liberties Organization, CLO. This was on October 15, 1987. A pioneer member of the Guardian newspapers. This was in 1983. He was also the news editor of Vanguard newspapers in 1990. He is currently the director of Media Law Center and also publisher, editor-in-chief of Corruption Cases Journal, as well as Courtroom Magazine and Media Law Journal. Uncle Richie, like I call him, will be our guest tonight. Mr. Richard Akinnola, the fearless public affairs analyst, public affairs commentator, historian, author, young at heart. Uncle Richie is in Ife. Uncle Richie is always in shorts, face scarf, t-shirts, and co. You know. I can't wait for him to join us tonight so that we can get started. Uncle Richie, like I call him.
I would like to start from what is currently going on between the Nigerian Bar Association and the governor of Kaduna State. That's talking about Nasir. As a journalist, also as an activist and the public affairs, what is your take on that?
What I think is a nice development. First of all, I think a mistake was made. If it was actually a mistake by the planning committee when they sent that invitation to El Rufai. I mean, in fairness to El Rufai, I mean, he didn't lobby to be speaker. He was invited, and he accepted. So, and but somehow, I mean, quite a number of lawyers were not so comfortable. I mean, for various reasons, particularly about what has been happening in the southern Kaduna axis and a couple of other alleged infractions in terms of rule of law and human rights. So, and they petitioned. And of course, if almost 5,000 members of an association petitioned, and it behoves on the neck of the body to actually look at, to have a second look at that particular thing. Because otherwise, don't forget that NBA is just coming out of a very contentious election, and it will lead to a major, I mean, conflagration in NBA if 5,000 people protested over an individual and the NEC did not take action. So I think, I mean, they had no choice. The neck of NBA had no choice to take that particular decision. But it was, I mean, well, I think if you look at in 1962, there was the Anglo-Nigerian Defense Pact, which triggered lots of protests in Nigeria, particularly by the students. And eventually, I mean, the government had to backtrack, and the pact was cancelled. So I think it's democracy at work. And but interestingly, I was just wondering that supposing that had happened in NUJ, would it have been possible for NUJ, for example, to have taken that decision? I doubt whether NUJ will have that kind of confidence and temerity to do that one, and to withdraw an invitation, which I think is part of the institutional.
Have already been extended.
It's part of the institutional challenges that the NUJ has been facing over the couple of years. So, but I think it's a nice development, so that subsequently, before any such decision is taken on, not necessarily NBA, it could be just any other body, before you extend, particularly a body that yes, particularly for if you have large membership, before you extend such invitation, you have to go through, I mean, lots of extensive discussions and look at
before you arrive for speakers and co. Well, thank you very much.
Unfortunately, the whole thing had, developed into an ethnic and religious thing, which is quite unfortunate. It shouldn't have been, because I'm sure that a couple of members in the NBA NEC are from that part of the country. So I think it's quite unfortunate that the thing has degenerated into an ethnic and religious debate.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kuichi. Now, Uncle, you started as a journalist. Before adding law and activism knowledge. What was your practice like back then, when you started?
Well, I think at that time, in fact, sometimes I just wonder these days how we were able to cope in this when there was no GSM, there was no internet, so it was purely analog, and of course, journalism at that time is cut and paste. So sometimes I just wonder, I mean, how are we coping? Because these days, you go to an assignment. Right there, you can send your reports, straight to the newsroom. You don't have to be in the newsroom, but you just interface with your news editor. But in those days, you had to come physically to the newsroom. The news editor had to, look at your script and then interrogate you, as it were. And all the missing links in that particular story and stuff like that. And but quite frankly, the dedication at that time much greater than now, because today quite a substantial number of journalists are more interested in just the comfort, the name, and the money, but not in terms of the professional output and in terms of professionalism and ethics. So which was much better at that time. So, for example, I recall that during the time of military, I give this particular example. When there was this coup that overthrew Shagari in December 31, 1983. So then we were in Ghana at that time. So there was no phone, no internet. So we had to go out and get different aspects of the coup, then get back, then check all the various checkpoints and stuff like that. Then you, of course, being an essential worker, you were able to navigate through the various checkpoints. So I recall this particular incident in Guardian. So we reported, we were working on different aspects. Guardian in those days, even up to now, Guardian will take every different angle, all manner of angles in that particular story. So when it was around 1:30 a.m. on the second day, so we were just tired. So, and I now told I think it was Wale Agunbiade or so. I said, come, let's go to Ilupeju and go and look for beer. Despite the fact that there was curfew. you know, journalists. So I picked my car and drove to Ilupeju to go and buy a carton of beer. So on our way back, so we now met the checkpoints. I said, Wala don't come today. I said, Wala don't come. So they pack. So just we are essential. So no, of course the military and so like that. So they said, open your boot. So once they saw that carton of beer, they were happy. So you know, I begged them, come. I can't drive all the way from here to Ilupeju and back, and you can't pack the whole carton of beer. So I said, okay, just give me 2 for myself and my colleague. So we begged them out of the whole carton of beer. So they took the whole carton and gave us 2 bottles. So when we got to the newsroom and we told them that story, and that's why I said today that President Buhari is owing me a carton of beer because the soldiers took my carton of beer. So that was the fun at that time when we were practicing journalism. Unlike now when it's digital and you can stay at any point in time and send your stories.
Wow. I love that.
I know, you see, when people talk about fake news and stuff like that, fake news is not new now. It has always been with us.
It has always been there. Just that it's now it's been enlarged.
Yeah, because of digital age. Yes. Okay. Because at that time, I recall that in 1989 stroke 1990, there was this magazine called Akapa magazine.
By Lawrence Akapa, I remember.
Yes. So, I mean, Lawrence was a fantastic cartoonist. Wonderful guy. I mean, he was in charge of the Mr. and Mrs. in a cartoon in a Vanguard. Fantastic guy. So, but when he left and set up this magazine, maybe because of the challenges of, getting to the market, then they started publishing some terrible fake news. I mean, fake news. So, and I happen to be the chairman of the ethics committee of the NUJ, Lagos State NUJ. So myself, Tunji Bello, who is now in a commercial in Lagos State. Femi Judu is now Senator Femi Judu now. We are all together in that committee. So and we looked at it was a try and quote of Akapa magazine. Dele Momodu came to give evidence. I think this woman, Moji Danesa, and all of them came to give evidence. So eventually, we found Akapa magazine liable. And that moral sanction alone led to the death of that magazine.
Wow.
That moral sanction, that your professional body, found you liable.
Pass the vote of no confidence on what you're doing.
And that was the end of that magazine.
Wow.
But today, we have seen worse things, even particularly in this age of and unfortunately, yes, at that time the institutional checks and balances were there in LUJ and the professional body. There, of course, the Nigerian Press Council was still, not as moribund as it is now. The Nigerian Press Council was still, in existence, even though it was like a moral sanction on journalists. So, but now there's no Nigerian Press Council. The institutional bodies. Exactly. The institutional checks and balances no longer there. So everybody just does whatever he likes.
All right. Now, Uncle Richard, I would like to find out from you, what is your candid assessment of the journalism profession today?
Well, I think in terms of investigation,
yes,
there are improvements, no doubt about it. And of course, for those of us who started practicing under military, it's a different ball game when you are in a democratic environment. Although some of us were practicing before the military, then when the military came again, So, and it was an adversarial practice, because it's like you had a common enemy.
That you
And
needed to
so,
confront.
but unlike now, exactly, unlike now, when, I mean, you are under democracy and there's what we call constructive engagement, which a couple of people in civil society does. So, but in terms of journalism, investigation has increased, no doubt about it, in terms of, because you have more equipment, you have spy cameras, that you can, some of them are like biros, some of them are in your
Classes.
so many things. So investigation, particularly when you see people like Premier Times, Cable, and the rest of it, in terms of investigation, yes. So, but unfortunately, again, and I mean, I don't know why, in terms of the traditional media, there's lots of misinformation, because when you pick one daily newspaper, and it's like you have picked almost, I mean, you have read everything. I mean, because like today, before any paper goes to bed, you must get the final copy from Abuja. That's where the news breaks anyway. So, but how many of them, apart from the online news, how many of them actually go into in-depth investigation like the online news? So that's the major challenge. Because for it to be different, you must have a niche for yourself. Just like Weekend Concord did at that time. I mean, Weekend Concord under Michael Oyenfa and late Dingba, fantastic, fantastic output from them. So they came from a unique perspective, and which I think there is still room for it. Because sometimes I begin to wonder, because I know that Sunday Times in those days, under Gbadabo Ogunsowo and Tunji Oseni, I mean, Sunday Times, we had a print run of 300,000, 500,000 per week. And now you can hardly have, I mean, even cumulatively, all the newspapers, daily newspapers, I'm not too sure that you have up to 60,000 cumulatively. And yes, we know that economy is bad, but that something must be wrong somewhere, because economy wasn't that buoyant at that time. Even though you had you can buy paper for very 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 cheap at that time, but now when you compare that amount to what we have today, I mean, it's almost what we have today. So then we have to interrogate, why is it that people don't buy newspapers the way they used to buy in those days? So it's either, I mean, in terms of professional output, that once you pick one, you have read everything. So you must be different.
Of news.
Yes, because when Weekend Concord came, Weekend Concord went haywire. It became the highest selling newspaper at that time. But because it came with a different format, different approach. So which I think today's newspaper and magazine can still do, because there are still rooms for that. If you know your particular area of focus and why you have to adopt certain marketing strategies.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, I need you to tell us, who is a good journalist? I need you to give us the portrait of who a good journalist should be.
You see, I have always said, when we talk about that every journalist needs to be objective, I agree, objectivity. But with a caveat, I subscribe to subjective objectivity.
Subjective objectivity.
Yes. Okay.
I like that.
If 5 reporters go for a press conference, for example, and each of you have the text of that particular press conference, each of you, depending on your area of interest or your proprietorial interest, you take that story from different perspectives.
Angles. Yeah.
Yes, but you will still give the story good treatment. But to an average person, depending on the interest of the person who gave that press conference, who perhaps will want that story to take it from a particular angle. And if that story is not taken for that particular angle, he will accuse the reporter of being biased. But to me, that reporter had reported different angles of that particular press conference. It's just that he must take that particular story for a particular angle that, I mean, because when you get to a particular conference, the editor will say, I prefer this one. I want this particular story. This particular, angle. Let me give an example. When I was doing some training for journalists in Ibadan in 2002 or thereabout, I was having some training session for sub-editors. And you know what? Something very unique came out of that particular training event. Some of the chief sub-editors told us that, look, Oga, all this we are talking about here is just theory. That from their own experience, that when they get to a editorial conference, they will say, okay, what was the print run? What are what are the sales? What are the print run and what are the sales for yesterday? And let's assume it was 3,000 or 5,000. Headline. So subsequently,
Yes.
that particular newspaper said that they now invited the circulation manager to be casting headlines for them.
Circulation manager to cast headlines.
Yes, not the chief of editor again. I you know what? After casting those headlines, the next day when you get to the conference, you discover that the sales have gone up.
Really?
So, yes, because they wanted to. The circulation managers just wanted the paper to sell, irrespective of whether it's ethical or not. But the chief sub wanted a professional headline. But the circulation manager wanted the paper to be wanted the circulation to increase, to improve. So, and that becomes a major challenge for an average journalist. That when you come out with a good copy, and you get to your newsroom, and there is this when you get to editorial meeting, how are you going to convince the other line editors that this particular story will sell, no matter how good that story is? Yes, you have been balanced. You have been objective. You have taken different angles of that particular story.
Wow.
You have, on both sides, you have taken both sides. But despite that, can this particular story you want to lead with, can this particular story sell? So, and that's why you see some of the story. You wonder why should this story, be put inside or just, put in a very obscure part of the front page, and then bring one relevant story up. Then at that time, so the issue of playing up photographs became an issue. Because at that time, photographs started coming when the swimming smart codes of this world started. When we were in Guardian together, swimming smart code came with a unique perspective in terms of using photograph in Guardian
to illustrate the stories.
Exactly. So subsequently, but people started, particularly for tabloid. If you look at the Sun of London, you see, it's a fantastic tabloid. And or the defunct News of the World, which was my best paper. No, I was really pained. I was really pained when Murdoch had to close that newspaper. I love tabloid. I love tabloid, man.
Yeah.
Good display of photographs and imaginative headlines. That's why I keep on. Each time I see back I say that it's the most imaginative headline cast I've seen. So a good journalist has to be balanced, get good side of the story, and of course. But my major challenge I've seen, because in the course of my media training, is that an average journalist does not actually know the rudiments of the legal implication of some of the things they publish. A good journalist, for example, today I see. You see rape cases. An underage is raped, and yet you see the name of that underage in that story. It's never done. It's never done. And that even sometimes they don't even cover the face or the victim.
Of the underage.
Yes. Even when they are charged to court, by law, you are not supposed, if you are under 16, you are not supposed to even to identify that rape victim. You're not supposed to, you just say X. It's just like when a security man, like a DSS operative, comes to give evidence. You don't give his name, just Mr. X, because of the nature of their job. So the same thing for a rape victim. Yeah, for a rape victim, you can't name that particular the name of that victim, and his photograph. You need to cover the face. Sometimes, but some newspapers they just only cover just the eyes. But anybody who knows that person, that description, will can identify that person. So these are some of the things we have seen, which shouldn't be.
Okay.
But unfortunately, but my challenge about us is that many journalists are not even interested in training. Not because I'm involved in training. So many of them, particularly on media law, they are not interested in training. People are just interested in money. That is all. But you see, but because yes, money is good, but you need to train yourself, because if you enter into a major libel situation, I mean, when I tell them, for example, that there are 4 defense of libel, many of them wonder. I mean, they were hearing for the first time that 4 defenses for libel. When I break it down, that of a defense, so they get surprised. But call them for a training session, you won't see. They won't come. Yeah, that's a major challenge, and that's why we see the level of performance. And I mean, my friend Emeka Opara will come and say Johnny is almost dead in Nigeria. I say Emeka, don't say that again. I say don't say that again. Although I'm just being denial, but the truth is that the level of
something needs to be done.
Something needs to be done, quite frankly.
You were saying something earlier on about libel. You said 4 things are involved. Could you just summarize these 4 things?
The 4 major defenses for libel.
Yes.
One is justification.
Okay.
Justification is okay. Yes, I believe, I stand by my story. It's true. What I say, I've said is true. You have no reputation to protect, and that was what happened in 1985. When I was in Guardian, I was the one that covered the Pre-4 trial of Tunde Thompson and Udo Karabo. Okay. And when we started Guardian in 1983, there was the house policy of simply Mr. Everybody Mr. No chief, no allergy, no doctor, everybody Mr. So when the Pre-4 trial started, and after my reports, and the next day I will see Chief Roti Williams instead of Mr. Roti Williams that I wrote. So I thought it was a mistake. The second hearing date, I write Mr. Roti Williams, but the next day, the newspaper, I say Chief Roti Williams. So I went to go and meet my boss, Femi Kusa. I said, okay, what's happening? He said, just do your own and let me do my own. So I now knew that something was going on. So subsequently, I started writing Chief. Okay. So throughout the period of that trial, I was writing Chief. Yes. So at the end of the day, then Delegiwa, who was then editor-in-chief of Newswatch, they now published a story.
Uncle Richie, you were telling us something. You said 4 things.
Yes. The first one. The first one. Yeah, the first one. Sorry, I want to emphasize something on that first one.
Okay, all right.
So Delegiwa, who was the editor-in-chief of Newswatch, they now published that the death of Simply Mr. in Guardian. So Roti Williams now wrote to Newswatch that we're going to sue them for defamation. So Delegiwa took the letter to Ganifa Emi, their lawyer, and Ganifa was dancing. And I was in Ganifa's chambers that day. He was dancing. Later, when Delegiwa left, I was asking him, why are you dancing? He said, you don't know. I've been waiting for this opportunity to deal with this man. So he now wrote back to Roti Williams that Newswatch stood by the story that he could go to court. So Roti Williams now filed the writ against Newswatch. So Gani now pleaded justification that Roti Williams had no reputation to protect, that he stood by the story. Okay. And he now went to excavate a 1949 judgment by Justice Abbott.
1949?
Yes, by Justice Abbott, where Rosie Williams was upbraided for stealing his client's money. So and Gani now said, I mean, so Rosie Williams now, that was the stage of the case before Legal was killed, and then I mean, Gani withdrew. That's the number one. That's for justification. Then you have fair comment. Fair comment
Okay.
as number two. Fair comment. Then you have qualified privilege.
Okay.
Because when you report press conference and the rest of it, qualified privilege, then you have absolute privilege. Absolute privilege that when you are in the parliament or in the courts, a judge has absolute privilege, a lawyer has absolute privilege, whatever they say in court, nobody can sue them to court. Then when you are in parliament, you have absolute privilege. I mean, nobody can sue you to court for what you say in parliament. So those are the four defenses.
All right.
Defamation.
Thank you very much. Now, Uncle Richie, with the benefit of hindsight, what would you say is the commonest mistake that most journalists make?
I think assumption, and based on ignorance.
Okay.
There are lots of ignorance among journalists, and I say with all due respect. And it still boils down to the issue of education, continued education, training, and retraining. Now, how many newspapers, how many media houses actually undertake training for new reporters recruited? None. They just, once you hire them, you just throw them into the field. But under normal circumstances, you ought to have at least 1 or 2 weeks induction. The house style and the pros and cons, bring some external consultants to train them on what to expect, because it's one thing to you to be trained as a journalist, it's another thing for you to have a different thing when you're on the field. For example, when I was a news editor in Guardian, I mean in Vanguard in 1990, there was a lady reporter. I sent him to go and cover one press conference. He came back. Where's your story? He said rain fell. He said rain fell. Okay, rain fell. Okay, fine. Okay, where's your story? Where's your story? He said, okay, I said it rained. And if it rained, is that the story? So, under normal circumstances, if she had been trained, the fact that rain disrupted that particular event, that the person who was supposed to address the press conference couldn't come because of rain. So you see, so many people, most media houses, they don't invest in training, because when you hire your reporters, you must go do 1 or 2 weeks of training, which doesn't happen. So, which I think is a major shortcoming that we have seen today. And of course, the challenges of no salaries and stuff like that, I mean, it's a major issue in the media. And that's why when we're talking about palliative for the media, when NUJ and Guild were asking for palliative, I said, no, the palliative, you can't expect government to give you money. What you expect to do that, ask the government to remove VAT or to reduce VAT substantially on newsprint. And that will be the palliative that will be much more relevant. Once they remove VAT on newsprint, which is a major component, and the ink, I mean, substantially, I mean, that will aid publishers. And of course, but fortunately, it has been done now in respect of the broadcast. I think Lai Mohammed, the Minister of Information, I mean, I think in conjunction with Bond, I think they have given some waivers in terms of payment of licensing fees, and that so which is good. But in terms of the print media, I think, I mean, that still has to be done, because we import newsprint, we don't produce newsprint, we import ink and all the other components. So, and it's a very capital intensive environment that we are in industry when it comes to the newspaper. So an average person doesn't understand what goes into
all the challenges
to produce a newspaper, whether daily or weekly. I mean, most editors will grow gray hair within 2 months. And that's why many journalists die because of high blood pressure. They don't know. They are under pressure. Continue to meet deadline. To meet deadline. You go and get the particular story, meet deadline. And how to pay salaries. It's not easy.
Yes.
I know
yes,
you know now.
yes.
You know how this works.
I do, Uncle Richie. Yes. So, what would you say has been the greatest lesson that journalism has taught you?
I think with journalism, you can change the system. When I look at what happened under the military, how the media fought the military at the risk of their lives. I mean, we know what happened when the guerrilla journalism period, particularly for Tell and Newsweek, I mean Tell and the News. And you recall that when they banned the news and they came out with Tempo, the security agents went and started producing fake Tempo, and they put in front, beware of fake Tempo on the fake one. So in order to run the original Tempo out of town. So yes. So, but for the journalists for them to stand firm, how they stood firm under the military, I think that's a major lesson that you can change the side, and there's no government that can effectively deal with the media. Nigerian media is quite resilient. They may try it, they may pass any law, but Nigerian media is quite resilient. No government can cow Nigerian press. That's why I right from time of Amakiri to the time of Delegiwa to the time of Reku and all of them, no government can cow the media. That's why I know in Nigerian media.
Wow.
Because when you look at what happened under the military, particularly in terms of guerrilla journalism, there was no phone, there was no internet, the military. Then you know that, I mean, then there's no government that can successfully cow the media. So I think the media needs to be resolute, but I believe that for every freedom, there's a corresponding responsibility. There's no absolute freedom. Yes, we have 739, and of course we have 722 that the media must hold the government accountable. But again, the media too needs to be accountable. Because there's no freedom without responsibility.
Wow. Wow. So you now move from journalism to law, from law to activism. How did it happen?
So you see, I think in my own case, as far as activism is concerned, I think it's something ingrained in me. Because my mom told me a story that when I was in primary school, that there's one boy that used to beat me, and I will not beat, and I will cry. I come home to cry. So, but when they beat other people, I will fight on behalf of other people.
Wow.
But when it comes to my own turn, I won't fight for myself. So, and then my mom told me one day, like, look, I did not give back to a weakling. When that boy comes again, face him eyeball to eyeball and fight him. So the next day, I was ready. So the guy came again, and I beat him, and the guy fainted. So, so our headmaster now reported to our dad, who now told my mom that, look, if your son kills somebody, then two of you will be charged to court. That my hand one day. So I think that was how the whole thing started. Then you know, journalism, activism go together. That's the thing, because I believe in journalism with social relevance, not just journalism for the sake of it, but to change the system, to change the environment, and it requires an activist mindset to do that. So in 1987, few of us came together, October 15, 1987, to set up Civil Liberties Organization, CLO, which was the first human rights body in Nigeria. So, and so one was combining both together, and of course it was I enjoyed it because you know, as I said, journalism is just when you look at how our nationalists fought for independence, they were activists in their own right. The Azikiwes of this world, Awolowo's of this world, Tony Haru and Nahuru's of this world, even though they were journalists, but they were activists in their own right. because they were using journalism to fight a particular cause. That's why I believe that journalism without a particular cause, without social relevance, is dead. So you must fight to change the system, fight to change the environment, fight to change, all the terrible things in the country. That's why it was easy. When I say easy, not in the research of it, to key into the anti-military struggle, both as journalists and as an activist. And of course, in those days when we will just midnight, you go and write graffiti on Ikorodu Road. IBB must go. What people don't know, with paint, right? IBB must go. So at Palm Grove, IBB must go. I would. It was really heavy risk we were taking, but we enjoyed it. Or free Abiola now. I recall that our first sit at home strike in 1993 under CD. Odessa, who was one of the organizers. Odessa was coming from Ikoyi to go and monitor compliance, but at Woroshoki, all these Arab boys stopped him in Santana. He was using white Santana, I remember. So they smashed his windscreen. That what are you doing outside? They said people should stay at home. What are you doing outside? Didn't know that it was one of the people leaders.
One of the major brains behind the fight.
Yeah, I recall that our 5 million man march in Yaba to counter Daniel Kanu's Abacha must stay.
The one he had in Abuja.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had but my wife, didn't want me to, so I sneaked out. My wife didn't want to. I sneaked out, and I don't know because you are excited that you are fighting a system, and it was risky, but we don't look at such risks because when you look at all those things, and that's why when I was abducted in October 1996. When I was abducted, it was very funny. I just stepped out from Concord premises. It's on a Sunday.